Welcome to Losing Your Mind with Chris Cosentino, and we are here with Bob Roll. So for those of you who don't know Bob Roll, some of you see him on commentating for the Tour de France, correct?
Yes.
But Bob, you were one of the first riders from the U.S. to race in the Tour, correct?
That's true, yeah. First American team in the Tour de France.
And you are a Bay Area native.
Yeah, grew up in the East Bay, born in Oakland, deep roots in San Francisco, 3 or 4 generations on my mom's side, and way back to the 1800s on my dad's side. So I have a long and not contentious, but definitely interesting history with the Bay Area.
So how many years did you race professionally, both on the road, and you also raced professionally off-road?
Yeah, 14 years pro, 14 years. Which I could have done the same amount in maybe 7 or 8, but I was stubborn.
So what's really interesting, and I mean, I know the story, but a lot of people don't know the story of how you discovered racing and also how racing discovered you.
Yeah, in the East Bay in those days, this is early 80s, it was actually a pretty robust bike racing scene. It was one of the hotbeds of American cycling in those days, and just fortuitously happened to grow up there and was riding my bike to get between jobs because the traffic was so bad, which, by the way, has not improved. No, it hasn't. In the subsequent 30 plus years. It's maybe even gotten quite a bit worse. I try not to drive anywhere in the Bay Area. That's why I moved to Durango in the first place. It was just like, this is not tenable. But in those days, there was a good race scene, and I was riding my bike to and from work and using BART to get between my jobs, and happened to run across the Berkeley Bike Club, and they're like, do you want to do some rides? Do you want to do some racing? And I was like, yeah, I'll give that a try. And this is a good story. The club screened the CBS, I think it was, program of Paris-Roubaix. And I said to my club mates, I said, oh, I'm doing that. And that's simultaneously getting dropped on every club ride. They laughed right in my face. I'm like, no, I swear to God, guys, I'm doing that. I'm like 20 years old. I'm like, that's what I'm doing that. 3 years later, I was in Paris-Roubaix, and they were screening the Paris-Roubaix for the club, and there was me, like the only finisher from the 7-Eleven team that year in Paris-Roubaix. So.
That is amazing. I have a poster of you at the house that actually you signed for me, of you riding through the mud, which is like, I would say you're a good 2 inches above the rim in the mud. And everybody, of course, is riding on the cobble, and you chose the mud route. That
actually is a pretty good encapsulation of what our team, like the evolution of the 7-Eleven team. We didn't ever do any recon. Every corner was an adventure.
Unlike now, which everything is
unlike now, everybody
previewed, redo.
A lot of Soudal, they did the cobbles for Tour of Flanders yesterday, and we're here we were at the New Year's, so first team ride cobbles from Tour of Flanders just so they can preview it. Every single time we did a race, no American except for Greg LeMond, who wasn't talking to us. Just kidding. Don't write in. Who was busy being a superstar. So we were just like, oh, Paris-Roubaix, yeah, we'll do that. And that's why I was in the mud in that picture that Graham Watson took, because I saw an opportunity to pass a lot of the group. I'm like, oh, I'm moving up. And I came around the corner, I'm like, ah!
Did you move up at all?
I did, and I was lucky enough not to crash. But every other team had done the reconnaissance, and they knew that to avoid that. So not knowing that was, one of those lucky moments that lives in posterity. And it's a good shot. It's a really good shot.
That's a great shot. And just like that look of determination that you had on your face. And it's like, you can see that everybody is just trying to stay on track, trying to stay out of that rut. And there you are, dead center in the middle of it, choosing that you're going to get through no matter what. I am going to make it.
That's exactly what happened.
But, I think like what you're saying right now, which is very interesting to me, is that you're talking about the recon and the teams. I mean, you guys really didn't have a huge budget to even do recon.
No, it was none. There was none of that.
You had a team of what I look at as, I look at it as, when I was coming up as a kid and I was skateboarding and cycling, it's like, I remember watching you guys. It's kind of funny that you're my neighbor now, but, it's funny to me to look and see who everybody was. And in your teammates, you had Chris Carmichael, Finney.
Yep, Davis Finney, yeah.
Davis Finney.
Ron Kiefel and Jeff Pierce and Steve Bauer and Andy Hampston and Roy, really very talented group of guys. And
that's no joke. That's no joke. You guys were the pinnacle and the godfathers of European cycling. Going first to go to, and I don't say that because of your age. I say that because you really inspired so many people to get on the bike and take that chance to go.
Yeah, it was.
You opened the doors.
It was the interesting times. It was, and that would have never happened without the talent, just the God-given talent that group of guys has, and that's something that I think about a lot. Because now the knowledge, you could be from anywhere in the world and just go on the internet and learn enough about professional racing to become a pro. You can look up aerodynamics, FTP, diet, strength versus race, weight optimization. You could watch every mile of every race on the whole calendar. You could grow up in Antarctica and become a professional bike racer if you have the talent now.
You would probably be really good at the super cold days and the shitty weather days, but I don't know about the hot days.
You could ride. No, you might. Yeah, in the middle of the tour, you might be dying in the mountains, but we didn't have any of that. So you can only imagine the difference and the talent required and the determination, like you said, for that group of guys to go over there, forget about everything, sacrifice everything, and believe that it was possible. And it's been, it's stuck with me. It's been a real honor. And I got to tell you, without my teammates, that would have never happened. Without that specific group of guys, don't think that it would have ever happened for us. Because we were actually dedicated to each other's well-being.
You guys are all still friends.
Yeah. And we're the only team from that era that has a reunion.
Really?
And every couple of years, we all get together somewhere, and do some rides and tell the stories. Believe me, no other team is doing that.
Well, you guys set a precedent. You were there as a group. Yeah. You guys celebrated together. You celebrated failure. You celebrated success, all with a smile.
Yeah.
And I think that is different.
I think you're right.
It's such a big dollar game.
Yeah.
And if I may ask, you can tell me to pound sand if you want to, but a salary then compared to a salary now is astronomical difference, correct?
Yeah, there's no retirement money. Nobody.
You had
not the best guy.
Your bikes were taken care of, your transportation, 2 to a room, maybe 3 depending on the room.
2 or 3 guys.
And did you guys have this? There was no big giant tour buses.
No, we didn't have the buses. We had little sedans, 2 sedans. One of the guys had to drive one of the cars.
One of the teammates had to. So talk about, so you just finished a day at the tour. You just finished out the
do 250K stage, and blazing hot.
How did you guys decide who was going to drive? Did you guys do rock, paper, scissors?
I did a lot of the driving to torture my teammates some more.
Rock, paper, scissors, Bob wins. Oh, God, he's driving.
Yeah, oh, God. I don't want to drive, but I don't really want Bobke to drive. Well, all right. Maybe we'll survive.
So that really also, really opens up a lot of people's eyes to hear things like that. I think now when you look at the bigger picture of things, the instant perception is, oh, man, they must have had everything taken care of, catered meals. But now it's like...
We did the most with what we had, and our staff was very dedicated. And if you were to multiply our staff by 3 people each, it'd been, world class. But the sport wasn't like that.
And were all the teams at that time like that, or
it was some teams that were more, better funded, more local. The teams of Paul Coakley and Peter Post and Jan Ross, they had maybe a little bit more resources, way more knowledge, obviously, because nobody had done it before. But I don't feel like we were at a big disadvantage personnel-wise. Our staff was so good and so dedicated, and we had so much passion for what we were doing that it made up for whatever we were lacking in
shortfalls in money.
In resources.
The fun that you guys had. I mean,
nobody had more fun than we did.
The outtake pictures that I've seen. I mean, I've got a picture of you with the bicycle glasses that somebody sent me. I mean, the fun that you guys were having.
I showed up to a race, to a stage in the Tour wearing those. And you can only imagine if we had a sunglass sponsor in those days.
You would have been screwed. But that to me is like, that embodies what, to me, cycling's about. There's a form of individualism at the same time. It's a team. Yeah, you all work together, but yet you're allowed to be who you are.
Yeah,
and I think that's what is really special about it. I mean, everybody has their specialty. Everybody has their job. You know, it's like maybe it's your day that they're going to let you rip it and go for it, or maybe it's the day that you got to help somebody else. And I think it was so apparent in all the footage and all the videos and all the images, and watching as a kid. Watching those races and seeing you guys were having fun no matter what. And that to me was really cool.
It's funny, like if you look at the 24 hours you have as a bike racer, what you do with those, and you sleep 8 or 9, and then you race for 5, 6, or 7, that doesn't give you that much time. And guys now, like they look at their files, how much they weigh, their hydration, what their watts were like during the race. We didn't have any of that. All that time we spent telling stories about what happened, and I ruled the roost in the storytelling, believe me. So our dinner conversations, the other teams would look at us. They were just like longingly look across the dining room, like those guys haven't won a race in 3 months. Why are they laughing so hard? Like they are having the best time. And after a couple years, all of the European guys came over like, oh, I'd love to be on your team. It looks like so much fun. I'm like,
because they were probably getting the beat down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can have a potato for dinner.
Yeah. If they didn't win, no dessert, no talking. I'm like, and that's 90% of the guys every day.
So, when you look at your experience then, right, from racing, and you're looking at it now, you don't have to answer this because it could shoot you in the foot, but do you feel that it's lost that luster of fun and love, and it's gotten to be so technical and so number driven that, and like you and I have talked about this in the past, and how much fun certain riders are always having fun, and you can see it. But do you feel that it's lost some of that luster, and it's all about the win, the money, and the numbers?
There's fewer moments of that. That's for sure. But there's always guys that are outside, of the norm. And Peter Sagan is a great example of a guy who's having fun, and without the fun, he wouldn't. And he's so talented; he can have fun and still win the biggest races.
Naturally talented, having fun. Like for instance, I think last year, Sup coming out of nowhere, just
that was great,
blowing everybody's doors off.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. He did it with a smile on his face.
Yeah, he's having a good time
with a smile.
Yeah,
and to me, that is that love of the sport.
Yeah,
and I think I love watching the tour. I wake up every single year. I mean, you and I text during it live, which I know you're probably not supposed to.
Don't tell my bosses. That's during the commercial break.
Tatiana's like, stop texting Bob, he's working. I'm like, no, this is stupid, like back and forth. And Easton's, my son's laughing at it, like he's the one who wakes me up first thing in the morning to come and watch it.
Nice.
Because, it is exciting. There is still that love and I mean, the scenery, the whole experience. And I mean, you've done multiple different races throughout Europe, not only commentating, but racing. How did this love of food and wine start to come about? Was that when you were racing for 7-Eleven, when you were living there, or when you were traveling through?
It's funny, my parents had a real appreciation for gourmet food, and I think my dad was probably the first, at least in the East Bay, one of the very first people to appreciate the famous wine regions. And we had bottles of Burgundy, and starting in the 1960s. He was a bit of a Francophile, so he loved, he was just loved French culture, and my mom loved the cuisine, and took cooking classes and Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco is a good place to be if you had those sort of pursuits. So for me, there was an interval of time when I thought whatever my parents were doing was totally uncool. I was wrong about that.
Of course,
every kid, right?
Yeah.
I was wrong about that. So, and it's funny, it took me until after I was not racing anymore to appreciate what they were into, what they thought was of value. And it turns out that it's pretty cool.
This is actually water pouring, not wine. This is water.
Subsequently, I've totally gotten into, fine dining and good wine. And it's a furthering of the conversations you would normally have at a dinner table. So when we're traveling and we do, 7 8 hours on the mic for covering the races, then it's like dinner time and the stories come out. And we have such a great crew now at the tour that it's just been a sort of extension of my childhood, my whole life. So now Yancy tells stories and Christian tells stories and Phil and Paul sadly no more stories. We'll be telling the previous 32 years of stories for the rest of the time that Paul generated by himself. And so I'm looking forward to that. But it's just a great posse of guys. And, the Bay Area, to be honest, was a good place to grow up and still is if you're into that sort of thing, which I think is, some of the hallmarks of a good life, of good living.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you just touched on two really huge components of the Bay Area. You have, it's the birthplace of mountain biking, right? Cycling hotbed, brilliant food, and Napa, Sonoma wine.
Yeah.
I mean, you're like surrounded by it. I mean, we are basically in, I like to call it mini Europe, where everybody speaks English sometimes. Just depends on where you are for the day. And I think that's what makes it great. Like, just like when you're in Europe, you can go from, country to country pretty quickly. Here, you can go from neighborhood to neighborhood and get different foods from all over the world.
No, it's awesome.
And I think that's what makes it so special. It's a similar growing climate. It's, you can go skiing in 4 hours, or you can be surfing, right down the street. And I think that's what makes it pretty
And Napa and Sonoma is just a phenomenal part of the country. I just absolutely love it up there.
And the riding's awesome.
The riding is world class, and all the wineries and the food it is really amazing. And to ride hard, you get hungry and thirsty, and this is the right place.
It's the right place for that. So how did you make, a lot of people don't know, I know because I was actually from Rhode Island, and you rode for ProFlex, which is a Rhode Island-based company.
That's right.
And I remember you showed up on a motorcycle with your ProFlex on the back and did a race in Vermont that I was at. And I was like, holy shit, that's Bob Roll. How the hell did he get here on a motorcycle? I thought he lived in Durango. We were all shocked that you were there. It was my first official real mountain bike
The
race.
ProFlexers had
the
that.
ProFlex.
So I thought it would be a good publicity stunt.
Yeah, you showed up, and that was like that was like the first crazy fork with the elastomer. It started with a stem, and then it went to the elastomer bumper on the fork, and it had the rear suspension elastomer.
It was one of the first full suspension mountain bikes to be raced on World Cups and Norbis.
And they were good bikes. There was a lot of great people out there.
Solid bikes, yeah.
And I used to go to the factory. I mean, I had Fat Chance, and we had those guys were up there in Massachusetts. And it was such an interesting thing growing up in New England because it's a totally different style of cycling. Road cycling wasn't as big there, for me at least. It was all about the mountain biking and the single track and the rock and the gnarly. And it's rough riding.
It's very technical.
It's very technical mountain bike riding.
Thrilling.
Lots of poison ivy. You can ride all throughout, like Vermont, New Hampshire. I mean, the riding's incredible, right? And how did you make that transition? Is it because you were living in Durango and you were surrounded by it? Or what made you switch and say, you know what, I'm just going to suffer in the dirt now?
I felt like I had done the maximum in road racing that I set out to do.
And what year was this again?
This is 92. Okay. So it turned pro 85. So 7 years on the road and then 7 years on the mountain bike. And I wanted to do something new. I was burnt out, honestly. And it was, there was a lot of good times. There were a lot of very arduous, tough times. And we had like 8, 9 guys on the team over there. So we had to do every single race. And we had 1 week, Tour of Flanders, Ghent-Wevelgem, Paris-Roubaix.
So this is at a time.
And then the next week, Flèche-Wallonne, Amstel Gold, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And then straight to Tour of Romandy, and then Tour of Italy, then Tour de France. It was a murderous schedule.
So your team number, how many riders were on 7-Eleven at that time?
I mean, it probably, we had 2 programs going. One for North America, so that was 5, 6, 7, 8 guys, and 1 in Europe.
So the Europe guys would only race in Europe, not in the US?
Well, we would,
Would you float people back and forth?
Yeah, we would definitely do that. But we had, we started again. Eric Heiden had to fly. He was going to medical school at Stanford. We only had 5 guys. They wouldn't let us start. He had to fly to Brussels, drive to Ghent, sign in, get his race number, drive back to the airport, fly back.
And he didn't even race.
Otherwise, we couldn't have started Ghent-Wevelgem. And Ron Kiefel got 3rd.
See, that's amazing.
See, that's like, the European teams are like, these guys are from a different planet. They're like, California, like, where's that? It was like Columbus going, to the edge of the flat world. So it was, it's hard to describe like how logistically impossible it was what we did. But, we wanted to do that. And so, the logistics is a big part of cycling, unlike any other sport. Not just the race itself.
The getting ready, the training.
Yeah, all of that stuff. All of that stuff.
It's a commitment.
Yeah, it's a definitely commitment. And you can't do that unless you're crazy about it. And maybe
a little crazy too. Yeah, I think
Period.
There's something about, it's like, there's something about suffering.
Yeah. That
in cycling, I think it's part that you have to embrace, right? And I think
absolutely.
I remember the first time we met, and it was in Durango, and I was camping at John Bailey's place. I had just finished Montezuma's Revenge on a single speed, and John Bailey and I were going into town to get something to eat, and you were riding down the street with your daughter. And John introduced me to you, and he told you that I had just finished Montezuma's, and the look on your face was of sheer, like, are you dumb? And I remember your daughter called me a knacker. I will never, she was like, you are a knacker. And I looked at Bailey, and I was like, what the hell's a knacker? I was like, I'm sure that's some kid word I don't know yet. And it was pretty funny because it was such an interesting time because I was in between races at that point. I just finished doing Montezuma's Revenge. I was in Durango because they had the World Cup there that weekend. And I was checking out the course and hanging out with Bailey. And then I was heading back to Leadville to do the Leadville 100 on a single speed. And Bailey was telling you that, and you just looked at me like, you're doing what on a single speed and why?
Yes.
And, it was a situation in time where the suffer was fun.
Yeah.
It still is, but I rode a single speed because I'm dyslexic and I couldn't shift properly, and nothing could break except for me. So I had nothing to blame other than myself.
I mean, suffering's
powerful.
Yeah,
right?
It's the coin of the realm. That's what bike racing's about. And it's the opioid epidemic we have. People they have lost this sort of basic value in that. And if you don't have that, it's impossible to be a bike racer. And you don't necessarily need to, go through that all the time, but
there's moments when you need to.
Moments that's an essential. That's as important as air in your tires. And bike racing brings that out in people. And you can make up a little bit your ability to suffer for your VO2 max, a little bit, a few percentage points. But when you get to the very top of the pyramid, that's the difference between 5th through 20th and 1st through 5th in the Tour de France and the Giro and the Vuelta. So it's intriguing to watch people, men and women, go through that. And bike racing brings that out better than anything. And if you're doing a 24-hour mountain bike race on a single speed, like for me, 2.5 hours was plenty. And I'm like, and you told me like, and I'm like, it's how long? And you can't shift. And I told you, I remember, this is why Ruby called you a knacker. I said, the derailleur came after the single speed. That's what evolution is. And you're like, you didn't explain the whole reason, the whole dyslexia, but I was like, I looked at Ruby, and Ruby's like, you're a knacker, which was an expression that the British cyclists used, to be knackered, which is in the slaughterhouse when they clobber an animal. You knacker them.
It's only how many years later that I finally figured it out.
I'm glad we could that we could shed some light on that expression. Blammo! So when the Brits would say, "I'm knackered, mate," that meant that was like almost lights out. And that's when you go into the pain cave.
And there is
and find out who you are.
That's true. And I think that is a really powerful moment, right? Like 24-hour racing, we call it the witching hour, and it's around 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's when I've seen spaceships, I've come back into laps, and I told my wife, I was like, I saw the aliens. They're coming. She was like, okay, here's some food. Shove food in me, and she just pushed me back to the back. She's like, I don't want to have this conversation with you. Go. And you find out who you really are. You push through those moments. And once you get to the other side, it's not that long to get to the other side. That moment switches. You get through that pain moment, and then you find out what you really have left.
Yeah.
Because you know it's you gotta go.
Yeah. Some people don't like that, and they are exposed to it one time and quit the sport.
Well, in anything, I think it's also the fear of the unknown. You're scared of what could happen. Yeah. What could possibly happen? Maybe you'll fall down. Maybe you'll get up. But I think the measure of our success is how we learn to deal with the problem. I just look at that pain cave as a problem. How do I get past it? You know, I mean, you would get up in the morning. You'd do 225K, go to bed, get up and do it again. Like, I can't even fathom that concept of doing that over and over.
There is a lot of hard work to have those epiphanous moments. You don't just think, okay, I'm going to do Milano San Remo, and on the Poggio, I'm going to go deep into the outer stratosphere of suffering. That's just not it. You have to sneak up on it for weeks and months and years, and then. That's an extreme example, 300 kilometer, classic race in the springtime when the weather can be bad. But everybody can push themselves beyond what they think they're capable of. Almost everybody can do that.
What was your...
And cycling requires that you have to do that.
Every day.
Almost every day.
Of all the classics that you raced, what's your favorite that you raced, and what's your favorite to commentate now?
Yeah, I loved Liège-Bastogne-Liège when I was racing. And physiologically, those hard 2, 3, 4 kilometer climbs that come very frequently and adds up to a tremendous amount of climbing. But I love Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Crap weather, vicious field, really hard, 280 kilometers, and crosswinds, and just vicious. And I would feel bad for 250 Ks. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, now, okay, let's go, guys. And if I was still anywhere near the front of the group, it was fun. And commentating, it's a good question. Classics-wise, probably Paris-Roubaix is the best one to commentate on. Grand Tour, Tour de France, there's just so much drama. And the teams are much more willing to, or they have enough resources to be able to get those stories to us so we can share them. The Tour, because of that, you get if you watch the whole Tour and you have never seen, if you watch our coverage of the Tour and you've never seen a bike race, the first day you'll be like, it's just, it's like a herd of buffalo painted in rainbow colors coming at me at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
I think that's the best description I've ever heard. I love that.
And you're just like, what? But if you listen, and in 3 weeks, you will know so much about the sport because of the resources we have, because it's so big, and the team's willingness to tell us, okay, what's this guy gone through today? Who's not well, and the crashes, and you see the guy bandaged from head to toe. He looks like a mummy the next day.
That's brutal.
It's brutal. It's grim. And you will learn our sport. So I love working on the tour. I love it. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's the best 3 weeks professionally of the year.
I mean, I think when a lot of people ask me, they're like, "Oh man, are you watching basketball? Are you watching baseball?" I'm like, "No, I only watch one sport." And they're like, "How do you watch cycling?" I'm like, "Well, how do you watch basketball?" I'm like, "How do you watch football? Football's dudes in tight pants jumping on each other, grunting. I don't understand it." And they're like, "Well, you guys on bikes ride around in tight pants." I'm like, "Dude, it's totally different sport. There's no negating each other's sport. I'm not saying
of course
one is better than the other.
Yeah.
I just enjoy the chess aspect. I think that cycling is almost like chess in a way.
Absolutely.
It's all about your moves. It's all about pre-planning, but it's all about getting ready, the thought process, the being able to go into the hurt cave and how long can you stay in the hurt cave. But watching the tour every year, there's so much to see and so much to learn. I mean, there's technology, there's equipment changes, there's aerodynamics, there's new clothing materials. I mean, every year there's something new, right? You guys are always sharing new stuff. But I think for me, the classics are always important. I think that is my special place. Like Paris-Roubaix lands on my birthday every few years. That's why, 2 years ago, I reached out to you and I went and rode the Paris-Roubaix Sportif the day before. And you reached out to Paul and thank you, for doing that. And he got us into the VIP area and we literally stood on the side of the velodrome.
That's awesome.
I mean, Easton was standing next to Stuart O'Grady. I was watching Jonathan Vaughters pull his hair out. Literally, I mean, he had clumps of his hair in his hand that year because his guy was in the top 3. But I was watching that moment from after riding it the day before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I went into that event not in the best of shape. I was too heavy. I had just spent a week in London and a week in Paris eating. And I get there and I'm too heavy. And my buddy Terry Curley drags my fat butt the whole way. And you really realize how fast and how hard it is when you're riding on those cobbles. Like riding through the Ehrenberg Forest, to look to the left, they every year have the annual tractor drag where they grind up all the grass so nobody can ride on the grass on the side of the road, right?
Yeah.
They don't want anybody to be able to ride on something smooth. They want you to suffer through the middle. And it is insane. Like riding it the day before, then watching them come through in the same spot the next day. I mean, I was going full gas. You start as you're going to Ehrenberg Forest, as you know. You've got a nice lead up. It's all smooth. You give it everything you got. Get on those cobbles and you're going. And all it takes is one person in front of you to stumble, slow down. You're done.
Yeah.
You're over. All that moment, all that game you think you're making comes to a screeching halt. And you've got to start it all over again. Because the faster you go, the more you float.
Right.
The slower you go.
Yeah.
It's literally like going 10 rounds with Mike Tyson to your undercarriage. Right? I mean, there's no other way to explain riding.
It mauls your junk, yeah.
It mauls your junk. I mean, I don't care how much chamois butter or DZ's nuts you put under there, how many, it's brutal. It's brutal on bikes. It's brutal on you.
Yeah.
And that event.
You bring up a good point that you can actually, in cycling, you can ride the climbs that they do in the tour. You can ride the cobbles.
You can be whatever you want.
You can go up the Poggio and see the graffiti from the day before. And it's no other sports like that.
That was the other great thing about cycling is that you can reach out and say hello.
Yeah.
Whereas in other professional sports, you're kept away, you're shielded. Where a lot of the athletes in cycling really want to communicate with the next generation. They want to spend time. What last time Tour of California came through, we went over and I introduced my son to Davis. And I introduced my son to Tyler. Finney, and being able to introduce him to all these people and him be excited about what the sport is and talk to them and see that they are putting in the effort and they are nice people. That's a cool component because
Absolutely.
These kids can reach their heroes, can reach professional athletes and talk to them and get some insight.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other sports, all people do is clamor for a signature and you're not allowed.
Yeah, the interplay between the fans and the racers is, and you can be basically in the middle of the 50-yard line at the Super Bowl, which other sports it's just not possible. But in cycling, you're like, when those critical moments happen, you can actually be standing right there.
There's nothing like it.
No.
There's nothing like,
that's a big part of the allure of all of the big races.
I loved it. Standing in the Ehrenberg Forest, walking over and having these guys grill sausage.
Yeah.
Right before that whole area, there's people grilling sausage, people selling historical memorabilia, people selling team cycling cards. And then you had a drag queen farm dance show going on, and then somebody selling frites and special beer that was specifically made for Paris-Roubaix. And then you run back to this vehicle, and then you follow it along the highway, all the way back into town. But after riding it the day before, I whole new respect. I don't yell at the TV anymore. Go faster, because I know they can't go any faster. My son would be like, "Stop yelling at them, Dad. They can't hear you. You're an idiot. You're a knucklehead, Dad. They can't hear you. They're not going to go any faster." I'm like, now after riding it, I'm like, God, those guys are going so bloody fast. It's amazing. The tour is the one thing that I've yet to be at. And you and I have talked about doing something there together for, I don't know, past 5 years. We've talked about doing something, whether it's riding and eating and, but that is the next big viewing. I got to go.
All right. Anytime.
Soon, I hope. So tell me a little bit about your mountain biking and what that was like, because we kind of veered off and went around.
We did go a circuitous route back to it. Yeah, it was huge in those days. It was massive. The Norbas had 50,000 spectators, and the World Cups, that much and more. And so it was really thrilling to be racing in those days. And Tinker, Juarez, and Ned Overend, and John Tomac, and Julie Furtado, and Ruthie Mathis, and Susan DiMattei, they were on top of the world. So it was very fun times. And it was a lot of sponsorship. It was very vibrant and not lucrative, but most certainly, solid. I made way more money racing mountain bikes than I made on the road. And so, it allowed me to buy a house in Durango, Colorado. So I was...
Cheers to that. I
know. I was pretty stoked about it. So I could bring my daughter home from the hospital to a house. My name was on the deed, so in the courthouse. So that was a big part of the incentive for me. But physically, it was a real challenge for me to transition, in my early 30s, from road racing, which is a very different discipline, to mountain biking.
Is it the technical aspect that was really
the starts? You go from 0 to 100 in the first 50 yards.
Sprint,
It's a full-blown sprint. And the 280 kilometer classic, you go hard, but you're not going wide open, full gas, which is what I was used to. An 8-hour race. Now you're doing 2 hours, and the first 50 yards are the hardest of the whole race. I was like, where'd everybody go? What do you? And then you get to the first single track. Of course, there's the giant pileup. So then you're 5 minutes behind. And if you don't do that, you can't compete.
You can't get in. It's getting the whole shot.
Yeah, the whole shot is huge. Top 5. And you watch now, it's 100 from 100 guys down to 3. And it's oh gosh, if you're not one of those guys, you're going to struggle all day. So that was a big transition physically. Just the effort. You go from making no watts to the maximum watts you're capable of in the first 100 yards.
But let's throw this out there. You didn't have watt meters then.
No, but, let's say effort. And a classic is a long fuse to a giant keg of dynamite at the end of it. The last 50 Ks of a classic is just pure mayhem. But the previous 230 Ks is just like this long fuse.
Just warming up.
And so that took me a long time. And the technical, handling your bike, especially first time I went east to where you grew up.
Gnarly.
I was like, this is impossible. You can't ride that. I would look down these trails. I'm like, I can't do that. And then I will watch you guys, come flying down. I'm like, that took me 4 or 5 years to be able to do that.
And I think the majority of them at that point were riding rigid forks.
There was a lot of, I think everybody was on a front fork at least, but 26-inch front fork, but with like 1.5 inches of travel.
Yeah, 1.5 inches
and,
of travel,
hardtail.
cantilever brakes.
Yeah,
Hardtail.
can't be 5 speeds,
Ugly.
if you're lucky.
Oh, brutal.
So the bikes were not that advanced, but the riders were. The riders were so, like Tinker, Johnny T, Ned.
Unreal.
Oh my God.
Johnny T was also a road transition, right?
No, he started BMXing. He started as a BMX racer.
But he raced on the road as well.
He did. He came maybe halfway through his mountain bike racing career. He was already a superstar mountain bike racer when he started racing for...
I always got, for some reason, I thought he started one and then switched.
No, he grew up BMXing in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken.
Crazy.
And so his bike handling skills, even to this day, are phenomenal. I rode with them maybe a couple of summers ago in Cortez, Colorado, at Phil's World.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this watch, he's like launching these huge jumps. I'm like, Johnny. And he's like, what do they call it when they flatten it out? Tabletopping?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't do those things.
I don't either. I don't even know what they're called.
I have enough trouble just keeping the rubber part down on the road, let alone doing jumps.
So technically, it was a long transition. And to conserve your energy, you have to be smooth to be competitive against the very best guys. And you watch Nino Schurter now, or Kate
Unreal.
Courtney, you're like, oh my God. And you look at the trail, you're like, that's all rock. And he's just like the Jetsons.
Oh, just flying over.
I'm like, that's brilliant. That's beautiful. Love it. But it took me a long time to just be competent enough. I wasn't completely exhausted at the bottom of each climb. That took a long time, which I didn't really count on. But I was so stubborn. I just kept plowing away at it till I was at least good enough to get close to a podium in the Norba. And that was really gratifying, actually. And as gratifying as, being on some of the first American teams to do the big races in Europe. But that was more personal gratification. There's less of a team element because the aerodynamics are not the same in mountain biking.
Yeah.
It's a part of the sport now because people are going so fast. But in the early 90s, mid 90s, that was like, you're just out in the forest by yourself, like drilling it. You don't need, and I would like kind of get lonely sometimes, like, there's nobody around to tell stories to. Like, I guess I'll just keep going hard until they tell me to stop.
Until I find somebody. Oh my God.
But it was thrilling to race mountain bikes. I'm really glad that I did that. I'm really, a lot of people stick to their road career or their mountain bike career and never try other disciplines. But I'm very happy that I did that. And now I ride mountain bikes whenever I can. And not as incompetent as when I started.
Well, also the riding's a lot different out here, right? So you're riding over in Tam and over in the headlands, and it's all big fire
so
roads.
much fun. It's
and
so awesome.
Super flowy and beautiful unless you go to like Tamarancho or something.
And the vistas,
it's stunning.
And Durango, like there is a million miles of world-class mountain biking.
Oh, yeah.
It's just absolutely phenomenal.
So how much are you riding still now? You ride on the rollers and training?
Yeah, I ride the rollers for maybe 33 minutes. That's my maximum. Maybe 44 if I can
ride rollers. I'm that idiot who like shoots off the front.
Well, if you put a video on your computer, like I can watch Gent Wevelgem and ride the rollers. Like I can watch the last 20 Ks, and in 35, 45 minutes, I can get a little workout in and do my homework for who's riding well for the next Paris-Roubaix or the next Liège-Bastogne.
That's smart. Yeah, I started using Zwift and a Wahoo trainer. It's a little bit safer. I'm not going to go shooting off the front.
Oh, I gotcha.
It's cool because I can actually ride I can ride with my friends. who are living in Chicago or LA or whatever, and we'll do training rides. So you actually, speaking of that, you used to do roller races.
I did a few of those, yeah.
Like the head-to-head roller races in Durango.
Yeah, those were thrilling. I don't know if they still have that, but in Durango we have every winter Winterfest, and it's called Snowdown, and it's a different theme every year. And there's events. There's like a trivia contest. There's a big parade, and there's roller races. So everybody packs in to the high school gymnasium, what used to be the high school, the old high school, the Smiley building, and it's just everybody's drinking beer and having fun. And I was stupid enough to do that a few times because it's 15 minutes as far as you can go, and it's very, very painful, excruciatingly painful. And I mean, people are like right next to you, so you don't want to get too out of control and go flying off the rollers into the crowd, which happens every year. Somebody's like, ah! And everybody starts cheering. So you don't want to be that guy. But I like riding the rollers. But like some guy, like Ben King had broken his ankle, I believe, a couple of winters ago. And during his rehabilitation, I think he did 8 hours on the trainer. Yeah, because I think Alex House did. I think Alex House. It could be 7, because thinking that they did 8 hours and
sitting one day.
Yeah,
straight through. My mind.
I could never do that. An hour is the most I've ever ridden on the rollers. So
I think I've done 2 hours on Zwift.
Wow.
But it was, you
impressive.
Can do specific, like you can do certain pros training rides. So like you can do a Paris-Roubaix specific one, you can do a climbing specific one, you can do I mean, 2 hours is the max.
You don't like the rollers?
I don't. I'm going to kill myself. I'm not.
Okay, this is why I have never gotten the sort of fixed trainer. The cycle up. There's millions of them where the front fork is bolted down, and there's no way you can fall. The bike won't tip over. I took up racing a little bit later, so to accelerate the efficiency on the bike, it was advised that you ride the rollers to smooth out your pedaling stroke. So I was playing catch up, when I was started, and so I was always focusing on my, just that, like, to get that perfect, which turns out is more biomechanical. It's more genetic, and guys generate power in that 360 degrees at different points based on their physiology more than how many hours they've spent on the rollers.
It probably gave you the best balance of your life.
But it was good. So that stuck with me. I recommend them, Chris. You might be surprised how smooth your pedaling is.
Maybe I'll come over and try it with you one day. You can catch me before I go head first.
Get a very narrow room so that you can.
So what you're saying is get a long closet.
Yeah.
And stick it in the closet and wedge the bike in.
Just wide enough for your shoulders.
So food-wise, in all your travels, where was your favorite country? Back when you were racing?
Yeah.
And now?
I'll tell you, like, we have had a lot of fancy meals, and I just like love to sit down and dog down and drink, and I love it. So I'm not like trying to be a critic or do like like comparisons. Like, everything to me is like you've just cheated death. Everything. You just, devil take the hindmost. You just push Satan a few inches further behind you. Every single one of those great meals, but nobody lays it out like the Italians. And being in those, like, it's almost like you're in a family situation, So we like love to, and I've been remiss, but I'm going back to Italy this year and going absolutely bananas at the
nice.
And it's impossible to find bad food. It's almost impossible to find bad food in Italy. And if I'm ever houseless, I'm moving to Modena, because Massimo Buttaro has a soup kitchen.
Yes, not a bad place to go to a soup kitchen, Massimo. He's one of a kind.
Right? So
Talk about a brilliant.
It's just amazing what he's doing. Yeah.
He's doing amazing things. I mean, Massimo is such a wonderful man, and he's such a lovely family, and everything that he's doing, feeding the public and really making people realize.
La Francescana, his restaurant, is like one of the best restaurants on the planet.
Yeah, I think it's in the top 5. It might be actually the number 1. I can't remember.
So anyways, like that's like the gold standard, and it just trickles down from there. You can get a sandwich and a cup of coffee on the freeway at a gas station in Italy, and it's like, oh, that's yummy.
Why is
I want 5 more.
Why is it that? And it's the same thing. If you're in Japan, it's the same thing too. You're on the train, you can get the perfect tonkatsu sandwich, right? And the bread's perfect, and the meat's perfect, and it's crunchy, and there's the. Why can't we do that here? What's wrong? Like, why haven't we figured that out? It's the same thing in France,
we're
Spain.
a newer country. We're
still figuring it out. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
we're still figuring a lot of things out.
We're evolving.
And do you prefer wine-wise whites, big reds? What's your favorite?
No, I don't.
You're not.
Napa has great whites and reds. Actually, some very good sparkling wines come from Northern California also that maybe a little bit under people's radar. But Carneros, God, I've had some of the best bubbles.
I'm a bubbles freak. I love bubbles.
But yeah, if it's tasty, I love it. I mean, people get carried away with the ratings and the limited availability. I don't. I try to just drink good within my budget.
Drink what you like,
which you can do.
Yeah.
You can get some bottles of Spanish red wine for less than $50 that are absolutely spectacular. And my cellar is full of those.
And it's funny because I said to somebody the other day, they're like, well, what do you recommend? I said, drink what you like.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because people get lost sometimes when you start talking using all this terminology. A lot of people don't quite grasp it. Mm-hmm. Everybody's palate's a little bit different. You may taste dark cherry. Somebody might taste blackberry. You hear the terms, oh, this wine has such a beautiful leather aroma. Somebody's, what? What is that? It confuses people. And my whole process is drink what you like. Drink what makes you happy.
And try a bunch of stuff till you find something that you really like.
And then the whole a glass program is there for you to learn and to try stuff.
Yeah. It's been for me, it's been really, I have a lot of free time. So I've been able to study up on different, and taste actually in my travels, a lot of different types of wines and regions and styles. And, it's just awesome. I love that whole landscape it's infinite. It goes on forever.
I think that's what makes it fun. All right, I'm going to ask a couple quick questions and then we're going to cut it quick. Okay. Butter or olive oil?
Woo. I like olive oil to just have on food, but I prefer to cook with butter.
Okay. Parmesan or pecorino?
Golly. Grana Padano. That chunky, that 15-year-old, it's just like if you could get a big giant cotton candy that was made out of heroin, I would imagine, I've never tried. That's what a good Parmesan tastes like to me.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. Okay. Gummy bears, Reese's peanut butter cups.
Reese's all the way. I love Reese's. There's nothing like after 3 or 4 hours on the bike to stop at a gas station and get the big cup, get 3 of those, and just eat 1 immediately and then eat 2 in the next few miles and then you're back to normal. You're back oh, I'm good. I can keep going.
Banana, orange.
I'd have to go with a good orange. A good blood red orange from Sicily. There's nothing like it.
Wagyu or grass-fed?
I would go Wagyu. The marbling, dude, the umami. I mean grass-fed too, that's fine.
Okay. Sushi-wise, what's your one favorite piece?
God, you got to have some uni in there,
Always.
a little fresh dollop of uni, and some, some perfect sushi rice. I mean, that to me is like the most delightful morsel. It just, and as far as like fish, I like the ocean trout a lot. Like a nice piece of that.
I like surf clam.
Which one?
Surf clam.
Oh yeah.
I love the texture.
That's a hard one. That's like, there's so
There's so much. It's such a cool thing. Pasta or risotto?
Oh man. I say pasta. It's so infinitely, it's so highly evolved now. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Pastas, yeah. I bet risotto is. I mean, if I could line out my week, it would be, 5 days pasta, but 2 days big fat risottos for sure.
Okay, kale or arugula?
Kale. I like kale.
God, I'm so over
Kale's good. It's yummy.
It's good. I mean,
fresh kale right out of the garden.
I know it's delicious. It's just I like the pepper and arugula. Trust me.
I don't like arugula that much, if I'm honest. I know that's
okay.
It's too bitter. It has too much bitterness.
Oh, come on. All right, on your frites, mayo or ketchup?
I like. You know what I like to do is dip one in ketchup and then just a tiny little bit of mayo. So just that is.
I know you've been.
It's like Thousand Island.
In Belgium enough to know that's like all they want is mayo in there.
You can't. It's hard to find ketchup at a frites. Then they make great French fries. Maybe the best on the planet.
You know why?
The double dipping and the temperature.
You know what the fat is? It's horse fat.
Is that right?
Yeah.
God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's horse fat.
Not all. Okay.
So you're going to be at Campo Velo.
I can never eat frites in Belgium again.
No, you can. No, it doesn't matter.
Horses die, right? They
die. That's natural. So you're going to be with us in Campo Velo in April.
Yes, absolutely.
Which we're looking forward to. And looking forward to hearing your commentating coming up this year. It's going to be a fun year. I'm sure you're going to be really busy. I'd like to give a shout out to Paul.
Yes.
I know he was a very good friend of yours. And
yeah, we plowed through the world for the last 20 years as hard as we could. And I want to thank his family for letting me have that time with Paul. He's a very special person. And the coverage, the understanding of our sport is not ever going to be the same without him.
It won't be. I agree. And I just wanted to let you say that.
Thank you.
Have a few words for Paul. He's really, really affected a lot of people all around the world. And
yeah.
He's a really, really wonderful man.
Yeah, he's my soul brother. And it's going to be it. I've had some time now to absorb it, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through in my life. And would just try to keep his spirit alive by compassion, caring, and bringing everything you have to covering the races.
Awesome. Well, Bob, thank you very much for taking time. I know you got a busy schedule. And
my pleasure.
Going on. And
we're just going to the recycling.
Nice. Perfect.
So this is a good stopping off point.
Stopping point. And
then, great coffee.
Great coffee, and look forward to having you in for dinner soon.
Anytime.
Cheers. Let's go ride next week.
Sounds great.
All right. Cheers, man. Bye.
Cheers.